All right, I am Patrick here with Scream Stream, and we have a special interview today. We have Michael Cooney, who is the director of Jack Frost and Jack Frost 2, Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman, with us today. Thank you so much for agreeing to take some time out and talk to us today about your career.
Not a problem. Absolute pleasure, Patrick. I love talking about Jack Frost. I have only fond memories of both of the movies. So this time of year, if opportunity comes to talk about it, fantastic.
Right, right. So going back to the very beginning, you were born and raised in London, England, and what was your family reasons? Was it schooling? Was it career that made you move to the US?
Well, that story. I come from a theatrical family. My mum and dad were both actors, and my dad is a very successful writer and producer and director of British theatre and all over the world. And I think my sort of act of rebellion when I was a kid is I wanted to be a geography teacher. And I didn't know, but apparently this was a huge disappointment to my mum and dad, who wanted me to be an actor or whatever they wanted for me. But I think I wisely, because that was my life. That was I've slept in theaters and all as
Right.
a kid, and that was so teaching geography sounded exciting to me. And then actually I went for a moment. I applied to Exeter University just for that, and at some point I wised up and. I went to my mum and dad and I said, I think I wanted to be an actor. And I said, I think I want to be an actor. And apparently they were so relieved. Oh, thank goodness he's come to his senses. Um, and I auditioned in England, and people wanted to talk about my dad when to get to a drama school, which was
Hmm.
totally fine. It's absolutely cool. That's my entire life. That's what people wanted to talk about. That's absolutely cool. And I didn't even think about it. I happened to be visiting my brother who was living in Australia, and I stopped down in Los Angeles for a moment. And just wandering around, I happened to see the Lee Strasberg Theatre Institute, and I walked in and I said, "Hello, I'm Ray Cooney's son. Can I have an interview?" And they went, "Who's Ray Cooney?" And I think some part of me went, "Oh, that's sort of interesting that they didn't know who I was." And I auditioned and I got into acting school. And my dad and mum, they're brilliantly supportive. They sort of said to me if I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer, they would have put me through college and taken care of me. I didn't. And so they put me on a very small budget, but enough to pay rent and
Hmm.
not starve. And they said, "You've got 5 years. Go out there and see if you can make it work." Which is that's the sort of an opportunity that I appreciate and realize not a lot of actors or writers get. That I
Right.
had a baseline that I knew I wasn't going to starve. But then I got into acting school, and this is on the first Tuesday, they put you on video camera, and it was some scene that I was a policeman, and they played it back, and it was as bad as that. It was so awful. And I realized in that awful moment, I could still picture it in my head going, "Oh yeah, this isn't going to work. This is just awful." By that time, I'd told all my friends I'm off to LA to be the next Tom Cruise, and it's all going to be good. No, it's awful. And I, I think I blamed the writing, all these monologues, and I started writing my own monologues. The acting didn't improve, but I discovered I loved writing. And the
Hmm.
little backstory to that is I have failed every English exam in England ever. Can't spell, still can't spell. Thank goodness for word processors and spell check and all of that. Uh,
Right.
but I've failed everything, and so I didn't think I could write. Uh, and I never discovered the joy of it until it didn't matter. And I started writing these monologues, and I wrote plays, and I happened to have best friends who wanted to be movie producers.
Hmm.
And so they were making music videos and commercials. And so I worked on the set as just for nothing,
Right.
third, fourth AD, whatever I could do, PA,
Hmm.
learning it, and just fell in love with the movie business and television now. They're all movies now. They're all fantastic. So I
Hmm.
fell in love with production. Uh, Kept on writing. We kept on trying to sell things. Nothing sold. And this does weave into Jack Frost
Right.
because
Right.
I I didn't know. I wrote. I was writing lots of things, and I wrote this. I had a cabin up in Big Bear, which in California is about 2 hours away. It's snowy, and my two producer friends, my two mates, were with me, and we built this snowman up there, and we made it a slightly spooky, angry snowman. And the next morning, they were a couple. They were Vicky and Jeremy were a couple, and the next morning, Vicky said, "That snowman outside the window was just staring at me." And we thought, could you do a horror movie with something as that innocuous as loving as a childhood snowman? And we thought, that's silly. So what the first version I wrote was a much bigger version of it. And
Right, yeah.
I've told this story before. It was at one point a big budget movie that Rennie Harlin was on to direct, and it was all exciting. And the story is, all of this is like hearsay, and I was never in the room with Gina Davis when she read it and said it was awful. But apparently she read it and said, "This is terrible. You're not directing it. Anyway, I want to do a pirate movie." So they went off with their pirate movie, and this also coincided with the 5 years that my dad said, "I'll take care of you," had run out, and right at the collapse of this. It was like a $35 million movie it was going to be, and it all fell apart. And I went back to England with my tail between my legs. It had all sort of collapsed. And I went to work. My dad had some theaters at the time, and I went to work in the box office of one of his theaters. I moved back in with my mum and dad. Uh,
Hmm.
and my dad, he's written 26 plays that have been in the West End all around the world. He said, "Why don't you write a play?" He said, "I can't help you out there in Los Angeles. You discovered writing, which is wonderful." He said, "Write a play." And he said, "I'm not going to put it on in the West End, but we can do a play reading of it and see where it goes."
Hmm.
So I wrote this play called Cash on Delivery. And we had a play reading of it, and nothing really happened. I rewrote it after the play reading. And my dad's manager, who was also looking after my play, he said there's going to be a production of it in Norway. And I thought, oh, big whoop-de-doo, who cares? And was still working in the box office. And about 6 months later, I get a phone call from my dad's manager saying, "You've got a check from Norway. It's a big success." He says, "You got £4,000, which is at the time was enormous amount of money." And
Hmm.
he said, "They've made a mistake." He said, "They've sent £40,000. It's a mistake." So, and I still thought 4,000 was amazing. He phones me back the next day. "No, it's £40,000.
Oh, wow.
It's selling out a 2,000 seat theater in Oslo, and it's this huge success." And my dad is thinking, "This is wonderful. My son's going to take over the family business and be a playwright." And I am literally on the next plane back to Los Angeles with this check to my friends going, "We're making a movie. We're making a movie." And so we had productions office. And this was at the time when you could kind of fake your way into making a movie, that we used my 40 grand to get in production offices and start casting and all, so it looked like you're in production, hoping that the real money
Hmm.
would take over. And there was this company called Prism Entertainment who I don't know if we conned them or they conned up, whatever, but the production happened. They stepped up and said, "Sure." And at the last minute, they stepped up. And one of the reasons might have been is because, in fact, what we didn't know is they were about to declare bankruptcy. And Prism Entertainment, we were in pre-production. We were about a week out from shooting, and they announced their bankruptcy. And there's a sort of an interesting personal story here, and I didn't know this until a few years ago, is that my wife is an actress. Her name is Jessica Collins, and one of her claims to fame is the movie Leprechaun 4,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Leprechaun in Space. And what we didn't know is apparently Prism had a slate of maybe 8 movies, and their financing company says you can only choose 2 movies. And for some reason, they chose Jack Frost, and they also chose Leprechaun 4. And these are the last 2 movies financed by Prism and Lou Horowitz, who was the banker who did
Hmm.
it. And so, but I didn't know that until I met my wife 20
Yeah,
years later, and we figured that out
that's cool.
together. Yeah. But then, so the movie that one of the things that happened that Jack Frost then it was a low budget, and part of the that happens with that sort of budget is you're borrowing the money to make the movie, and you're actually, the longer it takes you to make, enormous 20-30% interest a year. So you are trying to make the movie in a short amount of time.
Right, right.
This is how they were done. And so a lot of the stories of Jack Frost are how quickly we had to do it. We had time in pre-production because we sort of financed that ourselves, like I said.
Right,
And
right.
that is one of the greatest lessons that I've learned, is the importance of pre-production and being organized. So when everything goes wrong, you've got plans A, B, C, D already
Yeah.
to go. And we were able to do that. And that goes down to, all shout outs go to Jeremy Page and Vicky Slopnick, my two producing friends, who they'd done this before. They were veterans of music videos and this commercials, infomercials. And so everything was brilliantly organized, so that when there was no snow, we had a backup plan. You know, all that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a
Awesome.
brief. That's some of the where I came from story.
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you touched on the fact that the original script was very different, and I've heard that through previous interviews that you switched or you changed the initial script to be a little bit more comical once you saw what the original Jack Frost um,
Yeah,
a bit looked like and stuff. So was it always going to be a balance of horror and comedy, or is it going to be more straight horror leaning?
it was more horror thriller, and then it's not just the fact that we saw this snowman for reals,
Hmm.
is that what I know, the stories of the budget. Money went missing in the budget for the snowman,
Hmm.
and we thought we were going to have multiple versions of Jack Frost, and we had one or two versions of Jack
Hmm.
Frost. And the thought was what he was going to be able to do as the movie progressed, we would have more intense versions of not a snowman, but a snow beast and ice beast that we would have.
Right.
And then when we realized we weren't, we were going to have this immobile 8-foot snowman. We then,
Right.
okay, we have to embrace this. This is what we've got. There's no time to build other snowmen. And that happened in the sort of the 3 weeks leading up to actually shooting, is that there was a warmer tone was put on
Hmm.
the movie, and the comedy came out of that. But it was a colder, darker tone piece, and the cinematographer Dean Lent helped us go, let's warm this all up. Let's make this. Let's give it a real kind of a family feel, but with the horror edge on it.
Hmm. Right. And this film is known for many different aspects, but probably one of the more notable ones is the fact it was the film debut of Shannon Elizabeth, and her infamous death scene in within the film and everything. And um, can you just talk about how she was on set, and if you
She's
know if she's very in the years past, if she, because a lot of times, like with, like for instance, for the longest time, Kevin Bacon didn't really acknowledge his Friday the 13th as his film debut,
yeah,
and so and some others have been the same. Do you know if she's about the same way, or if she's I guess if she acknowledges that that was her film debut?
absolutely. She's fantastic. If anyone gets an opportunity to work with her, she was lovely on the set. She's absolutely terrific, and she was game for anything. It was like in the audition. What I was able to do was sort of pair people up in the auditions, and then when Shannon, I forget who played Darren, put them together, and they had this lovely chemistry, and it was lovely to be able to cast them. And it's interesting you call it the death scene, because of course it's known as the snowman rape scene. It was never meant to be a snowman rape scene in the script. And there's again, I've talked about that, but this is making the best of what goes wrong. It was
Right.
one of the last things we shot. It might have been the last thing we shot with an actor. And it was actually the scene in the bathtub was the most involved sequence of anything. That any bathroom you shoot, you're going to have to build a bathroom because it's a small room. You're going to have flying walls and stuff.
Yeah.
This bathroom, because an 8-foot snowman comes up through the bottom of the bath, we had one set that was a real set that was the bathroom that we shot on. And another set was this amazing construction that was it was 12 feet in the air, the bathroom set. And there's a bathtub with a hole cut out of the bottom. And then underneath it, on a cherry picker gimbal thing that raises up, is the snowman with a stunt person inside, Shannon attached to him, and on a rocker, and the whole thing rises up and bangs back and forth.
Mm.
And the scene is meant to be him. She in the bathtub, freezes and smashes her against the wall and kills her by crushing her into the wall. Uh,
Right.
and I didn't push the crew a lot. We had some long hours. It wasn't crazy. This was a crazy day. This was going wrong. Trying to get this scene, gimbal rising up, actress strapped in, naked actress. She was fantastic,
Hmm.
covered with shaving cream to hide everything. Strapped. And lots of conversations about safety because they're up here and going back and
Right.
it's a tricky. It was a really difficult thing to shoot. And the first take rises up, goes back, and the carrot hits her in the eye. And so we bring it down, and we're running late, and then the manager looking, and again everything's on time, everything is costing money, and they're going
Hmm.
look at the time, and we have the medic comes in and does the eye, the whole thing, and I said just get rid of the carrot. We're doing it again, we're going again, and we shoot it, and it works beautifully. It looks fantastic, and we're fantastic. Shannon's wonderful. End of it. In editing, in the first assembly, the editor looks at me and goes, "You know what it looks like." So we embraced it. And look, the truth of it is, this was 25 years ago. I wouldn't do it now. I wouldn't go out and do a snowman rape scene. We have evolved. It's different. I've evolved.
Right.
To me, it was funny at the time. If you took, okay, that's what it looks like. Let's embrace it.
Hmm.
If I could George Lucas it and do different versions of it, I would CG the damn carrot back in and maybe even poke her in the eye with a carrot, and then that would be good. But that's the story of that. And look, I haven't spoken to Shannon. I do not know. The only thing that I can
Right.
tell you is when 13 Ghosts were coming out, and because something happened in the order of Jack Frost and 13 Ghosts, or there was a re-release or something, is we got a phone call from her manager. Not so I don't know if she had anything to do with it. It might have just been the manager protecting,
Right.
and he said, do not mention Shannon Elizabeth, 13 Ghosts, and Jack Frost. Well, okay, no one listens to us anyway. It doesn't matter. It speaks if she's in the movie. I can't take her out of the movie. Sorry if you're disappointed she's in the movie.
Right.
But that's the manager. And again, I didn't speak to the manager, so it's all hearsay. This is producers speaking to the manager. So, but that's what I heard is the man, which I understand. You've got a young talent. 13 Ghosts was fantastic, big
Hmm.
budget movie. You're trying, and there's this silly killer snowman movie. I get it. Please don't mention she's in it. I,
Right.
I can't take my name off it. So there you go.
And then, yeah, so you mentioned the fact that you had different versions, and I believe I read somewhere that originally you wanted the more beast-like version to have like fangs and stuff. Was the version like on the VHS release that was that more, I guess, dynamic looking version of it? Was that kind of what you originally wanted?
No, that fantastic lenticular.
Hmm.
The only reason we are talking about this movie 25 years later is that cover, and I know that this is so the further. So if we go back to the part of the story, which is Prism going bankrupt,
Right.
and the financier Lou Horowitz, who was a very famous financier back in the day of these low budget movies, chose two movies: Jack Frost, Leprechaun 4, and again, apparently I wasn't there. When he saw Jack Frost after it was finished and handed in, he what the fuck is this? He did not understand it, which I get it. You know, you can love Jack Frost for what it is, or go, this is terrible. And he
Right.
looked and went, what the hell am I meant to do with this? And he sold it to Apex. Now, what I think happened is that the marketing campaign for it is there was some guy at, and I forget his name, and I should know because I've told this story, a marketing guy at Apex looked at this film that was for sale and went, I know how to sell it. And he came up with the idea of that amazing lenticular design.
Right.
I've got the big version back there. I
Oh,
don't know
cool.
if I can show it to you.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll do it. Let me finish the story and I'll show you some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He came up with this idea and said to Apex, buy it, I can sell it. And Apex bought this movie. Now, the budget of the movie is anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million, depending on what you count as the budget. About $500,000 is what it costs to buy the money and pay the producers and borrow the money and pay the money, what you actually get to make a movie. Whatever. They bought it for $50,000 outright, all rights, Apex. I don't know how much money Apex made. They're now bankrupt. We tried to get money from them because they haven't paid the actors. This was non-guild for me, but it was SAG, and it's such a shame. SAG has tried to get money, but apparently it's dead end after dead end
Hmm.
of receivership and selling companies and whatever.
Right.
But they bought it for $50,000. Kudos to them. And they came up with this marketing campaign, and it was in every blockbuster and at the time, I think there was like 8,000, 10,000 blockbusters, and each of them had between 10 and 50 copies of the movie with that amazing lenticular that you would
Yeah.
walk by, and it got attention. And that's why people rented it, and then some portion of the people who watched it loved it for what it is, and now people talk about it. It's funny because I've made other movies, and this is the one that people love and want to chat about, which is fantastic.
Right. And then a couple years later, you made a sequel,
Yep.
and Revenge of the Mutant Killer Snowman with Christopher, coming back for
Yes.
his main character from the first one and stuff, and Scott McDonald. Um, uh, I've read in the past you've mentioned how it's a little bit more sillier than the first one and stuff, which that's an opinion, but I think a really cool aspect of it, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but um, the fact that it kind of it's almost like a Christmas in July type of a vibe with them going on a tropical vacation
Yep.
and everything, and so I don't know, was that intentional to kind of play
Yeah,
on the whole Christmas in July
that
angle?
too is that we. I think what happens in the time in between, and we got there was it. I don't know if it's a cult movie, but people talk about B movie. It's a B movie that has some success.
Right.
That you got to see what the people. So now you've shaped. There's the people who don't like Jack Frost, and the people who do. And I tried to make Jack Frost 2 for the people who do like it. Okay, this is if you want some silly blood and death and gore and jokes and one-liner, that's So there was much more of a sort of a narrow approach to it.
Mhm.
That sort of family warm feel of the first one. Um, it is much more aware of itself in the second one. And so, yeah, it was. So the first joke is, yeah, let's set it in the middle of summer on a tropical island,
Right, right.
play off that. I just recently rewatched the second one, and some of the deaths are great fun. I'd forgotten
Yeah.
the anvil that crushes the girl and all that. That was actually something I'd wanted to do in the first one, but
Mm.
wasn't able to do. Um, so yeah, so the second one, that was great fun to make.
Have you yourself, have you gone to or any or many horror conventions and
Never.
seen any? You haven't?
I haven't done that. I'm not a terribly good self promoter. I'm not. That's and so I haven't. The only thing that happened was I think 2 years ago now. The what was it? Vinegar syndrome.
Oh,
Is it?
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh.
I did a showing at the Egyptian, and I happened to have the only existing 35 mil print of the film.
Oh, wow.
front room. I happened to
Right.
have it, and they were there was a Blu-ray release of it, and
Right.
they were doing this Blu-ray release. And I said, well, I happen to have this, and so they screened the, and it looked beautiful.
Mhm.
Dean Lent, the cinematographer, who's done other wonderful things, gosh, it looked beautiful. When you saw it projected, how Dean actually wanted it, gosh,
Yeah.
it was good. And I thought, okay, it didn't. I don't know how many people are going to show up. The place was packed. It was full, and just everyone was obviously knew what they were seeing. They'd all seen it before. No one was showing up to see it who hadn't seen it, and it was overwhelming the amount of love and laughter in that showing. In that, it was really lovely. And then afterwards, they said, "Well, I signed some things," and there was a line of people to sign things. It was, it was quite humbling. It was very lovely to see
Right.
who enjoy this silly movie. Um, but it was lovely to see it big screen, beautiful
Yeah.
color, great sound. It held up on the big screen.
I was at a convention a couple months ago, and I was just browsing with a coworker of mine, and there was this booth of this guy that made his own like masks and stuff, and he had a Jack Frost head for sale,
I
and
might
he
have
had
those. I
yeah,
always I love searching online if there's any.
yeah,
I've got some props that I actually found
mm,
uh, online after the event online. That the but no, that I've got one of those masks
yeah,
that's in the front as well. I've also got this guy who's sitting here looking at me. He's kind of fun. This was made. This is
oh
spun
yeah,
from the second one, and this was made for me by the special effects guys. He's solid. This guy,
hmm,
he's not a foam one. He's not one of the real things, which is why he survived. We blew up. We trashed most of the little snowball
right,
in the second movie.
right. Well, I have only about two more questions for you, and then I'll let you go. But so you've talked an off and on couple years about potentially doing a third Jack Frost film. Is that something that's a very feasible option? You've talked about doing potential crowdfunding for it. Is that something you're actively looking to do, or is it kind of just like a pipeline dream? Or
It's this goes back to what I just said, as I'm not a very good self promoter. I think that if I had a different gene, one of the genes I didn't get from my dad is
hmm,
my dad would have made Jack Frost 3, 4, 5. So he would have gone out and done that. I don't have that. I'm not an introvert, but I'm very much get on with the next little project,
hmm,
um, and I've been very fortunate that some things have fallen into my lap that but I would, if the opportunity to make Jack Frost 3 came up, I would adore it. It would be fantastic. I've got half a script written. The end of number 2 is Jack Zilla, and he
right,
turns up at the end, and I've got a thought of how, to do a play on that sort of monster movie. Uh, and so I do have an idea for something. Yeah, I would love to. I've had enormous fun making them. Being in production is huge fun. And so,
mhm,
yeah, if that came about, of course, I would jump at the opportunity.
right.
You never know with Netflix. Then you said that Jack Frost 1 and 2 are currently running on a couple of the streaming services.
Right, yeah, it's
You know, some
yeah,
Amazon executive might come in the morning, and the algorithm says make Jack Frost 3. They
yeah,
tell my computer what to make. They type in what's streaming, what's being looked at. You never know. Enough people watch these things, they'll go, oh, we should make another one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting how that's like the main shift in what gets made and what doesn't get made, and just how especially this past 6 months, how with like Disney Plus coming out and everything, how the streaming, all these different companies that are coming out with their own streaming platforms, how that's becoming the main, almost more so than theatrical releases.
Yeah, no,
How it's the main.
it's shifting. I think that experience in the theater. I've got uh, 2 kids, 14, 15, who adore the MCU, and so we go and see those. And I'm glad we see those on the big screen with
Mhm,
surround and all of that. That is a fabulous experience. But one of the things that I hope with all this streaming and the algorithms that look for trends is that I think then that means there is a hope that if people search out a niche genre, that it
mhm,
doesn't go unnoticed. That if people, and from my point of view, if they look up Christmas horror movies, they put, oh, we need more
right.
or whatever it is, but for whatever filmmakers, that this is an opportunity uh, for producers to get noticed to have small niche things noticed.
Right, right, yeah. Well, do you have anything, currently that you're working on or going into next year that you are working on or have a hand in or
Yeah,
some sort of a, fingerprint on?
yeah. There's a couple of things. I'm working on a very fun a pilot for Fox. That's It's a family time travel. It's got some interesting little kooky things to it. And there's a thriller that I've written. It's now called Obscura, that Gail Ann Hurd is producing,
Mhm.
and we're finding cast for that at the moment.
Awesome.
And that is I've I wrote some movies, Identity and Six Souls, and some other ones that are more sort of thriller than
Mhm.
horror. And
Right,
that's
right.
this is hopefully a throwback to the like sort of the 1990s Joe Esterhaus, Jagged Edge,
Yeah.
those sort of very simple, a few characters.
Mhm.
Is he? Isn't he? Is she? Isn't she? Who done it? A murder mystery. And it's a it's a good piece with some fun twists along the way. And so that'll hopefully come together next year.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting.
Yeah,
Well, I want to thank you for taking a little bit of time of your day today to talk to us about your past, these two specific projects you were on, and it was a joy talking to you. I really appreciate it.
thank you, Patrick. Absolutely, always fun to chat about Jack Frost.